I'm Georgianna Lawson, 35, a freelance accountant, barely keeping my head above water. That Tuesday night, my brother dropped a line as if it were nothing. I just used your card for snacks. He sprawled across my couch in Eleanor Wells, Ohio, scrolling his phone without a care. At first, I thought it was just a couple of bucks for chips, but there was something in his tone, too casual, too smug, that made my stomach twist. I didn't respond. I walked into my room, opened my laptop, and checked my account. My heart stopped. $12,000 was gone. My entire savings had vanished overnight. Line after line appeared on the screen. High-end headphones, concert tickets, a smartwatch that cost more than my car payment. I felt like I couldn't breathe, but I held it in. Not long after, my dad called. His voice was calm, almost dismissive. "Don't make a big deal, Georgiana. He's your brother." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just cold, sharp silence. That night, while they slept, I logged into every account tied to my cards and froze them all. No access, no mercy. By 8:20 a.m., the next morning, my brother's scream echoed through the house when he picked up a call he never expected. I sipped my coffee, quiet, knowing this was only the beginning. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from those closest to you, and it's in the quietest moments that you finally learn where you stand. What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. I sat at my desk, heart pounding, staring at the bank statement. The numbers burned into my eyes. $12,000 gone in one night. My brother Douglas had said he'd use my card for snacks, lounging on my couch like it was nothing. I opened my banking app, fingers trembling, and the truth hit like a freight train. Both noise and selling headphones, $600. 4 VIP tickets to a Kendrick Lamar concert in Cleveland, $3,000. An Apple Watch Ultra, $900. A Razer gaming laptop, $4,000. A deposit for a DJI drone, $1,000. 2 round-trip flights to Miami, $2,500. My savings, every penny I'd clawed together from late-night accounting jobs in Ellen Wells, Ohio, obliterated by Douglas's greed. This wasn't a mistake. He'd planned every purchase, knowing exactly what he was doing. My chest tightened, betrayal sinking in like ice in my veins. I leaned back, trying to steady my breathing, but the anger kept rising. Douglas had always been like this, charming his way out of responsibility, leaving me to clean up his messes. 2 years ago, he borrowed $200 for groceries, then posted selfies from a casino in Toledo. Last summer, he needed $500 for rent, but I saw him driving a rented Mustang the next week. I'd let it go, thinking family deserves second chances. Now, staring at these charges, I felt like an idiot. How many times had I trusted him? Had he been scheming this for months, waiting to raid my account? The thought made my stomach twist into knots. I grabbed my phone and called the bank, my voice calm but my heart racing. The representative, a woman with a bored tone, pulled up my account. "These transactions are linked to an email, Douglas Lawson 88, she said. My blood ran cold. He had used my card saved in his phone from a time I let him order pizza for us. He hadn't even bothered to cover his tracks. "We can file disputes for these," the rep said, "but it'll take 3 to 7 days. Do you want to report fraud?" Fraud. The word hung heavy. Reporting Douglas could mean police, maybe even jail, but if I didn't, I'd be the one paying, literally. Asher's school fees were due next week. The mortgage on our little wooden house by Lake Superior was looming. I could barely afford groceries now. "File the disputes," I said, my throat dry, "and flag it for fraud." Hanging up, I stared at the laptop, the charges still glaring back. I thought about Asher, my son stuck in a corner of our home because Douglas had taken over his room. He hadn't said a word, but I saw the disappointment in his eyes when I was too busy helping Douglas to notice him. I'd been so focused on keeping the family together that I'd let my own kid down. And my dad, he'd brushed off $12,000 like it was spare change, telling me not to make a big deal. I wanted to scream, to confront Douglas right then, but I held back. I opened my email and found purchase confirmations sent straight to Douglas's inbox. He'd bought these things in my name without a shred of guilt. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was the way Douglas acted like he was entitled to it, like my hard work was his to spend. I thought about the years I'd spent building a life for Asher and me, late nights balancing clients' books, skipping vacations to save for his college fund. Douglas knew how tight things were. He knew I was saving for Asher's future, for a chance to move us to a better school district. Yet, he'd spent my money on luxuries I'd never dream of buying. I pulled up the bank's fraud form, my hands steady now. Filling it out felt like drawing a line in the sand. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for my dignity, for Asher, for the life we deserved. 8 months ago, Douglas showed up at my doorstep. It was a chilly February evening, and I opened the door to find him standing there, duffel bag in hand, looking more defeated than I'd ever seen. "I lost my job," he said, voice low, eyes avoiding mine. He'd been a car salesman at a dealership in Toledo, but the company downsized, and Douglas, with his spotty work record, was the first to go. He had nowhere else to turn, no savings, no plan, just a sob story about needing a place to crash for a few weeks. I let him in, thinking family sticks together, even when it hurts. I cleared out the guest room in our small wooden house, moving my son's art supplies and books to a corner of the living room. My son, 12, didn't complain, but I saw the way his shoulders slumped when I told him Douglas would be staying. I promised it was temporary, that Douglas would get back on his feet. I believed it too, at first. I gave Douglas money for groceries, covered his phone bill, even paid for new work clothes so he could interview for jobs. "I'm trying," he'd say, flashing that charming grin that always got him out of trouble. But weeks turned into months, and Douglas wasn't trying. He'd sleep until noon, scroll through social media, and leave dishes in the sink. I'd come home from long days of freelance accounting to find him watching TV, acting like he owned the place. It wasn't just the lack of effort that stung. Douglas took over our home, leaving my son squeezed into a corner of his own life. I'd catch my son doing homework on the couch because Douglas had spread his stuff across the dining table. I'd miss his school events, too busy picking up extra clients to cover the bills Douglas racked up. Once I found my son's soccer cleat buried under Douglas's laundry, and when I asked Douglas to be more considerate, he just shrugged. "Relax, it's not a big deal," he said, echoing the same careless tone I'd heard too many times. I kept giving, thinking it was my duty, but every dollar I handed over felt like a piece of my son's future slipping away. My dad made it worse. He'd call from his place across town, his voice warm but firm, saying I should help Douglas because he's family. To him, Douglas was still the golden boy who could do no wrong, the kid who'd charmed everyone with his quick wit and easy smile. When I mentioned Douglas wasn't looking for work, my dad brushed it off. "He's going through a rough patch," he'd say. "You've got a good job, Georgianna. It's your responsibility to hold the family together." Responsibility. That word cut deep. I'd been carrying it since I was a kid, always the one to fix things, to step up while Douglas coasted through life. My dad never saw the late nights I spent balancing books, the sacrifices I made to keep our home afloat. To him, helping Douglas was my job, no questions asked. I started noticing how Douglas's presence changed everything. My son stopped inviting friends over, embarrassed by the cluttered house and Douglas's loud phone calls. I'd overhear Douglas promising someone on the phone he'd pay them back soon, but I never saw him apply for a single job. I checked job boards myself, even printed out listings for warehouses and retail stores, but Douglas would glance at them and say, "I'm not working some dead-end gig." He wanted the high-rolling salesman life back, but he wasn't willing to start small. I kept paying for his gas, his takeout, his streaming subscriptions, all while my savings dwindled. I'd planned to save for a new laptop for my son's coding classes, but that money went to Douglas's emergencies instead. Looking back, I saw the pattern. Douglas had always leaned on me ever since we were kids. When he crashed his first car, I lent him my savings to cover repairs. When he dropped out of community college, I paid for his textbooks, hoping he'd go back. He never did. Each time my dad would pat me on the back, saying I was the strong one, the one who kept the family glued together. But being strong was exhausting, and Douglas knew it. He'd take and take, counting on my guilt to keep giving. I thought about confronting him back then, but every time I tried, he'd dodge with a joke or a promise to make it up. My dad would nod along, telling me to be patient, that Douglas would come around. Now, 8 months later, I realized how wrong I'd been to trust him. Douglas hadn't just taken my money, he'd taken my son's space, my peace, my trust. I'd let him into our home, thinking I was helping. But all I'd done was enable him. My dad's voice echoed in my head, urging me to keep helping, but I couldn't anymore. I was done being the family's safety net, done letting Douglas's choices drag us down. I sat at my desk, the weight of those 8 months pressing on me. I'd given so much, but it was never enough for him. I needed to protect my son, our home, our future. The bank was still processing my disputes, but that was just the start. I had to find a way to take back control, no matter how hard it would be. The next day, I dug deeper into the transactions. I opened my banking app, determined to uncover how Douglas had pulled this off. I noticed something odd. My phone hadn't received any transaction alerts, despite the $12,000 drained from my account. I logged into the app's security settings and froze. Douglas had accessed it using my card details, saved from a one-time pizza order. He'd turned off my notifications, rerouting them to his phone. My stomach churned. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment slip. He'd deliberately hidden his tracks, ensuring I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I grabbed Douglas's phone when he left it on the kitchen counter, his carelessness giving me an opening. The banking app was still logged in under a secondary profile he'd created. I scrolled through the transaction history. Luxury purchases, each one timestamped to the minute. He'd bought a Bose soundbar at 2 a.m., a set of premium golf clubs at 3:00 a.m., and a subscription for a high-end streaming service at dawn. He'd even used a VPN to mask his location, making it look like the purchases came from out of state. My hands shook as I took screenshots, each one a piece of evidence proving his lies. Douglas hadn't just spent my money. He'd built a system to deceive me, betting I'd stay oblivious. I called the bank, my voice tight with fury. The representative, a man with a clipped tone, confirmed the secondary profile. "Someone set up an alternate user on your account," he said. "They disabled your alerts and linked a different phone number, Douglas's number." I asked to lock the profile and escalate the disputes I had filed earlier. "It'll take 7 to 10 days to process," he said, "but we'll need a fraud affidavit to proceed." Fraud. The word felt heavy, like a line I couldn't uncross. But with my son's school fees due and our mortgage looming, I had no choice. "Send me the forms," I said, my jaw clenched. I couldn't afford to let Douglas's actions sink us. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a call from my dad. I answered, already dreading his words. "Georgianna, you're being too hard on Douglas," he started, his voice soft but insistent. "He's not a criminal. He just made a mistake." "A mistake?" I wanted to laugh, but it came out as a bitter scoff. I told him about the hidden profile, the disabled alerts, the VPN. "He planned this," I said. "He lied to my face." My dad sighed, launching into a story about how Douglas once borrowed his car as a teenager and returned it scratched, but apologized. "He always comes around," my dad said. "You don't give up on family." I gripped the phone, my patience fraying. Family didn't mean letting someone destroy you. His words stung, not just because he defended Douglas, but because they erased my own struggle. Growing up, I was the one who fixed everything, helping with bills when my dad was short, covering for Douglas when he messed up. Now, as a single mom scraping by, I was still expected to carry him. My dad didn't see the nights I stayed up balancing clients' books, or the times I skipped meals to save for my son's future. To him, Douglas's charm outweighed my sacrifices. I ended the call abruptly, unable to stomach another excuse. The disappointment settled in, heavy and familiar, like a wound that never fully healed. I went back to Douglas's phone, digging further. He deleted the banking app's notification history, but I found a cached push alert from the night of the purchases. It confirmed a payment for a luxury watch sent to his device. Every step he took was calculated, designed to keep me in the dark. I thought about my son stuck in a corner of our home because Douglas had claimed his space. I'd wanted to take him to a science museum, something to spark his love for coding. But that money was gone, spent on Douglas's whims. The betrayal cut deeper than the dollars. It was the way he'd exploited my trust, knowing how much I'd already given up for him. By noon the next day, the house felt like a war zone. I called a family meeting, my voice steady, as I asked Douglas and my dad to sit at the kitchen table in our Eleanor Wells home. My son was at school, spared from the tension that hung thick in the air. I laid out the screenshots from Douglas's phone, proof of his hidden banking profile and mass purchases. You didn't just use my card for snacks, I said, staring at Douglas. You spent $12,000 and tried to hide it. His face reddened, but instead of apologizing, he leaned forward, eyes narrow. You're making me sound like a thief, he snapped. I was going to pay you back. You're embarrassing me in front of Dad. I blinked, stunned by his nerve, embarrassing him. I pointed to the screenshots, each one showing his calculated moves to bypass my alerts. You turned off my notifications, I said, my voice rising. You used a VPN to cover your tracks. That's not a mistake, Douglas. He scoffed, crossing his arms. You're blowing this out of proportion. I needed those things to get my life together. You've got money, Georgianna. Why make this personal? My jaw tightened. He was turning this on me, acting like I was the one hurting him. I wanted to yell, but I kept my tone cold. It's personal when you take my son's future and spend it on golf clubs. My dad, sitting quietly until now, cleared his throat. Georgianna, let's calm down, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Family is above all this. Douglas didn't mean to hurt you. You need to forgive him and move on. I stared at him, my chest aching. Forgive him. My dad leaned back, his eyes soft like he was talking to a child. You've always been the strong one, he said. Douglas is struggling. He needs our support, not accusations. I felt a surge of frustration. My dad's words echoed years of the same pattern. Douglas messed up, and I was expected to fix it, to swallow my pain for the sake of family. I shook my head, my voice low but sharp. I've supported him for 8 months, Dad. I gave him a home, money, everything. He repaid me by stealing. Douglas slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle. I'm not a thief, he shouted. You're just jealous because I'm trying to live my life. Jealous? The word hit like a slap. I thought of the nights I'd worked late to pay our bills, the dreams I'd put on hold for my son. Douglas wasn't just denying his actions. He was rewriting the story to make me the villain. I stood up, done with the argument. This meeting's over, I said, walking out of the kitchen. That afternoon, I drove to a coffee shop to meet my friend Edith Hudson. She'd been my rock since high school, always seeing through the chaos of my family. I told her everything, the hidden profile, Douglas's excuses, my dad's blind loyalty. Edith listened, her eyes narrowing as I described the meeting. Georgianna, you're not the bad guy here, she said, setting down her coffee. Douglas is manipulating you, and your dad's enabling him. You need to set hard boundaries, starting with your money. She leaned forward, her voice steady. Lock him out of your accounts completely. Change every password, every PIN, and don't let guilt stop you. Your son deserves better than this. Edith's words hit home. She told me about a friend who'd lost everything to a family member's borrowing. You're not just protecting your bank account, she said. You're protecting your peace, your son's future. Douglas won't change unless you make him. I nodded, feeling a clarity I hadn't in months. Edith suggested practical steps. Freeze joint accounts, monitor my credit, even consult a lawyer if the bank's fraud team didn't resolve things. You've been carrying your family too long, she said. It's time to put yourself first. Driving home, I felt a shift. Douglas's accusations and my dad's pleas had shaken me, but Edith's advice anchored me. I wasn't wrong for standing up for myself. I thought about my son, how I'd let Douglas's chaos overshadow his needs. No more. I pulled into our driveway, my mind set. The bank was still processing the fraud affidavit, but I wasn't waiting. I had to take control, starting with boundaries Douglas couldn't cross. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for my life, for my son, for the right to say no. The next morning, I was on the phone with the bank again. I clutched the fraud affidavit, my voice firm as I confirmed the cancellation of 3 transactions, a $2,000 golf club set, a $1,500 streaming subscription, and a $3,000 luxury watch. The representative processed the reversals, crediting $6,500 back to my account. The rest are still under review, she said, but you should see updates in a week. I exhaled, a small weight lifting. It wasn't all my money, but it was a start, enough to cover my son's school fees and keep our mortgage on track. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. But I wasn't done. Douglas had to go. I called him into the living room. My dad was already there, sipping coffee like nothing was wrong. My son was at a friend's house, safe from what was coming. I stood tall, my voice steady. Douglas, you have 10 days to move out, I said, no room for negotiation. You stole from me, lied, and I'm done. His eyes widened, then narrowed, his face twisting with anger. He slammed his fist on the coffee table, the sound echoing through the house. "You're kicking me out?" he yelled. "You're so selfish, Georgiana. I'm your brother, and you're treating me like garbage." His words stung, but I held my ground, remembering Edith's advice about boundaries. "You spent $12,000 of my money," I said, my tone icy. "You hid it, used my card like it was yours. That's not family, that's theft." Douglas's face flushed red, his voice rising. "I was going to pay you back. You're making me look bad for no reason." No reason. I thought of my son squeezed into a corner of our home and the years I'd spent rebuilding our lives. Douglas wasn't just taking my money, he was taking my peace. I shook my head. 10 days, Douglas. Find somewhere else to stay. My dad set his coffee down, his expression heavy. "Georgiana, you can't do this," he said, his voice low. "He's got nowhere to go. You're tearing the family apart." I turned to him, my frustration boiling over. "Dad, I've carried him for 8 months. I've paid his bills, given him a home, and he repaid me by stealing. I'm protecting my son, my life." My dad opened his mouth, then closed it, his eyes searching mine. He tried again, softer. "Family sticks together, Georgiana. Give him another chance." I shook my head, resolute. I've given him too many already. Douglas stood, pacing the room, his hands clenched. "You're acting like you're perfect," he shouted. "You've always lorded your money over me, acting like I'm nothing." His words hit hard, twisting my resolve, but I saw through them. He was deflecting, just like always, making me the villain to dodge responsibility. I crossed my arms, unwavering. "You don't get to turn this on me. Pack your things." My dad stood, reaching for my arm, his voice pleading. "Georgiana, please think about what this does to us." I pulled away, my heart heavy but certain. "I am thinking, Dad, about me, about my son." For a moment the room was silent, the weight of my words settling in. Douglas stormed out, muttering under his breath, and my dad sank back into his chair, defeated. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was drowned out by something stronger, control. For years, I'd let their expectations pull me under, always the one to fix things, to forgive, to sacrifice. Not anymore. I thought of my son, his quiet resilience, and how I'd let Douglas's chaos dim his light. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming our home, our future. I sat at my desk later, checking the bank's email confirmation of the reverse transactions. The $6,500 was a lifeline, a step toward rebuilding what Douglas had taken. I changed every password, every PIN, locking him out for good. Edith's words echoed in my mind. "Protect your peace, your son's future." I felt lighter, like I'd shed a burden I'd carried too long. Douglas had 10 days, and I wouldn't budge. My dad's pleas still lingered, but they couldn't sway me. I was done being the family's safety net. For the first time, I felt in charge, ready to build a life where my son and I came first. A week later, the house grew quieter. In our Eleanor Wells home, the absence of Douglas's usual noise, his loud phone calls, the hum of his TV, felt both strange and freeing. He'd taken a job at a local hardware store, a condition I'd set for him to stay past the 10-day deadline. I'd hoped it would spark some responsibility, but 3 days in, he quit. "Too much standing around," he'd grumbled to my son, Asher, who'd overheard him on the porch. I wasn't surprised, but it solidified my resolve. Douglas wasn't going to change. Not here, not now. His half-hearted attempt at work was just another empty gesture, like all the promises he'd broken before. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table scrawled in Douglas's messy handwriting. "I'm sorry for the trouble," it read. "I'll figure things out and make it right. Don't hate me." That was it. No plan, no timeline, just vague words that felt more like an escape than an apology. I stood there staring at the paper, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. He'd packed his duffel bag and left before dawn, leaving the guest room empty, his dishes still in the sink. Asher wandered in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and asked, "Is Uncle Douglas gone?" I nodded, pulling him into a hug. "It's just us now," I said, my voice steady. That afternoon, my dad called, his voice heavy with concern. "Georgiana, I heard Douglas left," he said. "You should have given him more time. He was trying." I gripped the phone, my patience thin. "Trying?" I said. "He worked 3 days, Dad, then quit. He left a note that says nothing. I can't keep waiting for him to change." My dad sighed, his tone softening. He's your brother. He's lost right now. You're the one who holds us together. His words stung, echoing years of expectations I'd carried. I took a breath, keeping my voice firm. I've held on long enough. I have Asher to think about, and myself. He paused, then tried again. Just don't close the door on him forever. I shook my head, though he couldn't see. I'm not closing it, Dad, but he has to earn his way back. Hanging up, I felt a weight lift. For years, I'd been the fixer, the one who patched up Douglas's messes while my dad cheered him on. But now, with Douglas gone, I could breathe. I walked through the house, noticing how much space we'd regained. Asher's art supplies were back in the guest room, his soccer cleat no longer buried under clutter. I sat with him that evening, helping him with a coding project for school. His smile, wide and unguarded, reminded me why I'd fought so hard. This was our home, our life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from us again. I thought about Edith's advice, how she'd urged me to protect my peace. I'd followed through, changing every account, password, setting up fraud alerts, even scheduling a credit check. The bank had emailed that morning confirming another $3,000 in reversals, bringing my total recovered to $9,500. It wasn't everything, but it was enough to rebuild. I started a savings plan for Asher's coding camp, something I'd had to shelve when Douglas's spending drained us. For the first time in months, I felt like I was moving forward, not just surviving. Douglas's note stayed on my mind, its vagueness, a reminder of his refusal to take accountability. He hadn't mentioned paying me back or finding a job, just empty words to ease his guilt. I tucked the note into a drawer, not ready to throw it out, but unwilling to let it pull me back. My dad's call lingered too, but I was done letting his words sway me. I'd spent too long carrying their burdens, believing family meant sacrificing my own needs. Now I saw it differently. Family was Asher, our home, the life we were building together. As the days passed, I focused on Asher. We planned a weekend trip to a nearby science museum, something he'd wanted for months. I watched him sketch out ideas for a new coding project, his excitement filling the house with a warmth I'd missed. The quiet wasn't just the absence of Douglas, it was the presence of possibility. I felt lighter, like I'd reclaimed something I hadn't realized I'd lost. I wasn't sure if Douglas would ever come back or if he'd try to make things right. 2 weeks later, my bank account was breathing again. I opened an email from the bank confirming the final reversal of Douglas's transactions. $11,000 back in my account. It covered the mortgage, Asher's coding camp, and a stack of overdue utility bills. I sat at my desk, the numbers on the screen a quiet victory. Asher was at school, his backpack filled with new supplies I could now afford. For the first time in months, I wasn't scrambling to keep us afloat. The relief was tangible, like a knot in my chest finally loosening. I'd heard through a mutual friend that Douglas was struggling. He'd moved to a cheap apartment in Columbus, tried picking up shifts at a warehouse, but quit after a week, claiming the hours were too long. The bank had flagged his actions as potential fraud, and their investigation was now tracing his attempts to use my card on other accounts. I didn't know the details, but the thought of him facing consequences felt like justice, not vengeance. He'd built his own mess, and for once, I wasn't cleaning it up. I'd spent years believing I had to save him, but now I saw the truth. Douglas's choices were his own. My dad had gone silent. No calls, no texts, not even a check-in about Asher. After our last conversation, when I'd refused to give Douglas another chance, he'd stopped reaching out. I felt a pang of sadness. His absence was louder than his words ever were. Growing up, he'd always leaned on me to hold the family together, praising my strength while excusing Douglas's failures. Now, his withdrawal felt like a choice, to stand by Douglas, even at the cost of our relationship. I didn't chase him. I'd spent too long chasing approval that never came. Instead, I let the quiet settle, finding peace in it. Edith stopped by that weekend, bringing coffee and her usual blunt wisdom. "You did the right thing," she said, sitting on my couch. "You set boundaries, and that's power." I nodded, thinking of how I'd once equated kindness with letting people take from me. Edith's words, months ago, had shifted that. She'd shown me that protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. I'd learned to say no, to lock my accounts, to put Asher first. That lesson was hard-won, carved from betrayal and sleepless nights. I wouldn't let my kindness be a weakness again. Asher came home that afternoon, his face bright as he showed me a certificate from his coding class. "Top project," he said, grinning. I hugged him, my heart full. We planned a pizza night, something we hadn't done in months, and I watched him laugh, free from the tension Douglas had brought into our home. The guest room was now his space again, filled with posters and coding books. I'd started saving for a summer trip, maybe to Chicago, to visit the planetarium he loved. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and that was enough. Looking back, I saw the cost of unguarded trust. Douglas had taken more than money. He'd taken my sense of safety, my belief in family. But he'd also given me something: clarity. I'd learned that boundaries weren't walls. They were doors I could choose to open or close. My kindness was mine to give, not for others to demand. As I tucked Asher in that night, his room filled with the soft glow of his desk lamp, I felt a quiet strength. I didn't know if Douglas would ever take responsibility or if my dad would reach out again. But I had Asher, our home, and a future we were building together. That was my victory.